Coming up on City Spotlight, we're back on location in Mattoon at the Mattoon Public Library as we talk all about the local History Center. We'll talk with the curator of the local History Center, Chris Suerdieck. Chris will tell us how the local History Center came to be, recent programs held at the local History Center, and to end the program, Chris will give us a walking tour of the local History Center. We're back on location at the Mattoon Public Library in Mattoon, talking all about the local History Center, here on City Spotlight.
It's almost impossible to imagine life without internet today. It keeps us connected to work, school, and loved ones, no matter where they are. Fidium Fiber Internet now serves over 1 million locations, providing reliable, consistent service that keeps these connections strong. From vibrant cities to quiet rural areas, fiber broadband is a key driver of economic growth. Fidium is dedicated to supporting communities and enhancing lives through this essential technology. Learn more at fidiumfiber.com.
And hello and welcome to another edition of City Spotlight. As you can see, we're indoors for this latest episode here in season 11 of City Spotlight. We are back in a familiar spot, Mattoon. And we're taping at the local History Center, which is located at the Mattoon Public Library. And to help us out, we welcome first time to the program, the curator with the local History Center here in Mattoon, Chris Suerdieck. Chris, great to have you on.
Well, it's great to be here. Great to have you here. Thanks very much.
We are sitting down to start this episode. We're going to talk all about the local History Center in this entire episode. And we're going to have a little interview here with Chris to start off. And then we're going to mic Chris up and we're going to get a little walking tour. Very excited. I am also a history buff in addition to all my media responsibilities in the world. So I am a kid at heart here talking with Chris and learning about this very cool place, the local History Center. Before we learn about that, Chris, let's learn about you. You're a first-time guest on this program. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I was in the electrical supply business for 47 years.
Wow.
And in 2017, I retired. And, after about a year of doing all the things you think you're going to do when you retire, I was really casting about for something to do, a project. During my working career, I was a member of the Mattoon Public Library board for over 20 years. So kind of my heart and soul's always been in this library. So in 2018, I was having lunch with Carl Walworth, our director.
Yes.
And I told him I was interested in volunteering doing something at the library. And he said, well, and I said, I don't want a job, but I want a project. And he said, well, he says, we've got that local history room down in the basement. He says, and because of staff considerations and budget considerations, he says, we really don't have anybody that's been able to do anything with it.
Right.
He says, how would you like to tackle that? And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a fun thing to tackle. And Carl said, if you want to come down and spend 3 or 4 hours a week. Well, after the first week, I was here 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. I mean, it just became, immediately I saw the potential for what we had here. Even though nothing much had been done with it, serendipitously, the library staff going back 100 years had saved stuff. So it took me about the first year, basically all I did was sort stuff out, arrange files, go through filing cabinets, arrange the shelves, and make myself familiar with the material that had been saved and stored here. And as I did that, I just came to the realization, and thankfully Carl, who agreed, we need to get some of this stuff on display. So that was really the genesis of what we now call the History Center.
Wow.
And as we move through and on the walking tour, I'll kind of highlight that a little bit more.
Yes.
But initially, I thought, okay, I'll put some displays in one room. And after I got displays in one room, I thought, okay, I've still got a whole bunch more stuff. So then
you needed more room.
I needed more room. So this center has grown one room at a time. And as you'll see as we move through, every room kind of has a theme and a structure, but it was never, I'll just say it was never a master plan, but the plan came together. And our main focus is to share with not only Mattoon people but other people the history of Mattoon through industry, business, events, and institutions that have formed the city throughout the years.
There's so many ways I could go to follow up that initial comment. Thank you very much, Chris. And we had Carl Woolworth on the program talking Mattoon Public Library back in June at the end of season 10 of City Spotlight, and he briefly touched upon the local history center. I met Chris, came down here, got a few shots, and said, Chris, I think we need to tape with you. So that's why we are here today, taping on November 1st, 2024. And I feel obligated to ask this question, Chris, because I've interviewed other historians in our area. Why is it important to preserve local history?
Well, I think it's because, well, the main reason is because Mattoon has such a rich, vibrant history, and sadly, events and institutions that have come and gone, or even things that are still here today, people either didn't know about them, didn't understand the impact, or don't understand how they came to be. And a perfect example of that, and we're going to talk about much later, of course, is the latest exhibit that we did, which was a complete exhibit on the digging of the Illinois Central subway through Mattoon in 1914. And today, when people stand on the Broadway Bridge and look at the railroad tracks 27 feet below, they think they were always there. And they were not. And it was a major, major project on behalf of the Illinois Central and the city of Mattoon. And so that's the kind of story that I feel like is important to tell. The other thing that has led to a lot of these exhibits, as we became known and people started visiting, a lot of the questions I would get is, hey, my mom and dad used to shop at a corner grocery store at 27th and Marshall. Do you know what it was called and who ran it?
Yes.
So a lot of the displays we've done and a lot of the exhibits, I think would just fall under the term all dang syne. People want to remember the things of their childhood or their parents' childhood, and so a lot of our displays and a lot of our exhibits focus on categorizing those businesses and institutions and kind of preserving them for future generations.
And you started out, your title is Curator. I think if I remember hearing from Carl, and maybe you told me when we first met back in June, you started out kind of as a volunteer.
Yes,
doing this.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, and I'm
good.
still, I'm the lowest paid person on the staff.
Well, you're doing quite a bit, and we appreciate it. Let's highlight a couple of the newer things before we mic you up and get this walking tour going. Most recently, just a couple of days before we're taping here on November 1st, you had a program that you held, and it sounds like a pretty good turnout from what you told me. What was it about?
It was a great turnout. We were extremely pleased. We had over 100 people come into our community room on Wednesday evening, October 30th, and I presented a program on Mattoon's role in the Civil War. And Mattoon, even though all the fighting happened much farther south than us, and again, because of Mattoon was the apex of two of the major railroads during the Civil War in Illinois, Mattoon became a huge center for troops, supplies, and so everything in our Civil War Center focuses on Mattoon's role in the Civil War.
Right.
So we did that program Wednesday night. And it was, like I said, we were very pleased with the attendance, and I think people learned a lot about Mattoon's role in the Civil War and the history that entailed.
Fantastic. Great to hear about that, and important to learn about all of our the folks that have served in our wars, even back to the Civil War days, which is a long time ago.
Right.
But before that, your next newest edition, you showed me the pictures, and now it's up, and we'll see this at the end of our taping today.
Yes.
The exhibit involving the Illinois Central Railroad. When you showed me the pictures back in June, I was blown away because I am not from Mattoon, but I have been to that train depot more times than I can count. And to see the building of railroad tracks and still used today. Wow. What was initially when you got a hold of those photos? And they're beautiful, beautiful photos. I mean, to me, I have appreciated in all the productions we've done at WEIU, there is nothing better looking than a crystal clear, picture perfect, black and white photo.
No, exactly.
And so when you got a hold of those photos, what were you thinking, and are you amazed at what you've been able to put together with that?
Absolutely. Let me back up just a little bit.
Sure.
So in this exhibit, we have over 200 photos, and Over 100 of those are photos that were in the archives here at the History Center that we owned and that we have in our collection. Several months ago, I was approached by someone who had purchased at an auction many years ago and owned a set of 70 8x10 glass plate negatives that had been taken at the time of the construction project by the Illinois Central.
And how rare are those kind of photos?
They are unbelievably rare, and they were in an unbelievably good condition. They were very well preserved. They were packed in insulated cartons.
Because photos can go bad really easily.
They can, and these glass plate negatives produced some of the clearest, sharpest images, and so we scanned them all in to create a visual image. We scanned them all in at 600 DPI, so the resolution is amazing on them. So they actually make the backbone of the exhibit, and that was really the impetus to go ahead and create this exhibit, because we have 7 out of the 200 plus photos, 70 of them we're pretty well assured have never really been published or seen before outside of a few private collectors.
Right.
And I would mention that they were extremely expensive to acquire, and because our History Center operates entirely on donations and volunteer budget, we were able to reach out to several of our supporters who have been very generous with the History Center, and we're able to raise the funds to make this major purchase. So no library funds were used to purchase these photos.
And we will see that exhibit on the Illinois Central Railroad, photos that are over 100 years old. We will see that at the end of our walkthrough with Chris. And now we're going to stop recording here and mic Chris up, and he's going to give us a walking tour of the local History Center here in Mattoon. Okay, Chris, so we are now going to have our walking tour of the local History Center, and we are starting where it all got started.
That's correct. This was, as I mentioned, when this started, I just started with one room, and this was the initial set of displays. And the very first exhibit I did was right here to highlight the railroads in Mattoon, because Mattoon was actually formed when the two railroads crossed here on the prairie, the Illinois Central and what was then the Terre Haute and East Alton Railroad. So this it was the initial display to kind of highlight that. And then as I moved on in this room, a lot of people, when they found out that I was doing some of the historical research here, I started getting questions. And some of the early questions were on, that I mentioned before, the gas stations, grocery stores, restaurants. There's a tremendous interest in some of the car dealers in the old days in Mattoon. So everything in this room I kind of put together based on the interest that I was getting from people on topics that were of interest to them. And as you can see, Mattoon had a great number of new car dealers over the years. This one display shows that altogether there were 64 brands of cars sold in Mattoon, starting in 1910, and there were about 114 dealers. So it tells that story. And then we tell the story of the history of the library. This is a 1903 Carnegie Library. So we tell the story of the evolution of the library over those years. And then one of the most popular exhibits early on was after I put together a listing of the restaurants, gas stations, and grocery stores. I decided.
What are we looking at here?
This is a map of Mattoon, and the push pins show the location of those grocery stores, gas stations, and restaurants over the years. The blue pins are all the corner grocery stores, and it really gives a visual to let people see how prolific the corner grocery stores, mom and pops, were over the years, going all the way back to the turn of the century.
And you have some listings.
We have some listings of them. The red pins are the gas stations, and the yellow pins are the restaurants and drive-ins. And what's interesting when you look, especially at the gas stations, back in the day when everybody bought branded gas, there are on almost every corner where there was one gas station, there'd be a second gas station on an opposite corner. So you can see how the gas stations were all clustered, and they primarily followed the two major highways that also intersected Mattoon. So that gets a lot of interest and a lot of discussion. In these boards here, I just really try and show we've got a tremendous amount of Mattoon memorabilia, a lot of it based around the early advertising. And so this was the first set of display cabinets that I used to display some of that. And we also have a very unique selection of yardsticks that all came from Mattoon businesses over the years.
Wow. Names that are since long gone, but not forgotten.
That's correct. One of the really interesting stories in the early stories was, of course, the definitive story on Mattoon's original Burger King. And I was lucky enough, actually the Mattoon Burger King put me through Eastern 50 years ago. I worked there for 5 years, and I was personally acquainted and friends with Gene and Betty Hoots. And when I put this display together, I was lucky enough to be able to borrow Betty's scrapbook. So everything on this board is pretty well definitive. So we're going to walk down this way. This was kind of the next big project I did, using primarily city directories, and we put together a listing of the businesses that were located on Broadway and Western Avenue, starting in 1900, going all the way up to within a couple years ago. And this also gets a lot of interest from people when they like to come and they remember a store that they shopped at, or maybe a store that one of their relatives owned, and they can find it and identify it on this map. So this gets a lot of attention. This was a huge project to put together.
I'm looking back here at the starting point. It looks like 1808. That's going back.
No, that's the address.
Oh, 1808. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's 1808 Western.
Very good.
But the other interesting thing, and you keyed on something that's kind of interesting, is in 1897, the city commissioners assigned the city engineer the project of renumbering the streets, because they had all just been numbered kind of willy-nilly as the town developed. So a lot of the early addresses don't match with today's streets,
Okay,
and
very
that causes some confusion from time to time.
Glad you clarified that. Very good. Just lots of names. This is unbelievable research.
One of the things that I discovered when I started this project, and it's been a huge boon to my research, is over the years the library had saved city directories. So we have city directories going back all the way to 1894, which was the very first city directory published in Mattoon.
Okay.
So as we move, this was then the next center that we did, the next room, and everything that I tried to do in here was focus on some of the major industries and institutions that really made Mattoon. And at the time, when I did this room, I had no idea that I was going to be able to take over another couple of rooms as we moved along. So this was I really put a lot of focus here onto the really major businesses that made Mattoon. Of course, everybody's familiar with Rural King. The very first Rural King was opened in Mattoon on June 5th in 1960. We've got the story of Illinois Consolidated Communications, which became Consolidated Communications. And the thing that's unique about this story is it's really the story of the Lumpkin family,
Yep.
the story of the telephone company, and it also is the story of the development of telephones through our displays, because we have some of the earliest telephones.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And
There are people watching this right now. Chris, what are we looking at right here? This is old school telephones.
these are old school telephones, an old school switchboard.
Oh, those are cool to see.
And a lot of this material all came from Dick Lumpkin's private collection.
Oh wow.
Yes, and he donated them while he was still living. This phone booth was when it was Dick's, was in his private collection, and I've had various people tell me they think this might have been in the U.S. Grant Hotel, or it might have been in one of the banks. This is obviously an indoor telephone booth.
Yes.
Because it's wooden, but it kind of mirrors the look of the famous English red telephone boxes that you see in London.
Yes, I was going to say this looks like something out of a movie maybe I've seen it in England. So right on point.
Yeah, the thing people don't realize when they see those red telephone booths in England, those are cast iron because they're outdoors.
What we just looked at was very much wood.
Yes, it was. So then we've got the history of Lakeland.
Yes.
Lakeland has been we have a great collaboration with Lakeland. The part of their curriculum is the print shop. So the Lakeland print shop does all of our display boards for us.
Mattoon's very fortunate to have higher ed.
Yes, they are.
Right here in our backyard.
Yeah. This wall also highlights some of the major industries in Mattoon, and a couple that I really highlight is Atlas Imperial Diesel, which came here in the 30s, and during World War II they manufactured artillery shells. So they were the Mattoon's really only war production plant during World War II. And then Keeney Manufacturing came here in the 1930s, and they started out building wooden dinette sets and bedroom furniture. And in the mid-50s, they started making the chrome dinette sets of what we now call mid-century modern. And they were the largest manufacturer of chrome dinette sets in the United States. And so they were made right here at Mattoon. And then we've got the history of healthcare.
Fantastic.
With Sarah Bush.
And pre-Sarah Bush.
And pre-Sarah Bush, all the way back to Memorial Methodist Hospital.
I always wondered what the names of the pre-Sarah Bush hospitals were in Charleston and Mattoon. So very cool to see that.
And in our school corner over here shows we have a timeline that shows the history of all the Mattoon schools, going all the way back to the very first one that was built in 1864. And then to your left, you see we have a collection of Mattoon High School yearbooks going all the way back to 1904. These yearbooks are probably one of the most popular items here. People come down and spend hours going through our yearbooks.
You can certainly tell which ones are newer and older.
Correct. Yes. So to probably keep a little momentum here, we'll move along down to the
we're doing good.
Back in the next hall. And this again is a display of other businesses that didn't quite reach the level of longevity or employment of the ones that we highlighted in the main room. But these are also businesses that a lot of people remember that they had a significant impact on Mattoon. And one of the reasons that a lot of them came, of course, was because they were heavy industry and they needed the rail. And Mattoon was able to provide rail service.
Yeah, so the timing of the train tracks certainly allowed these businesses, even if they weren't like the Young Radiator Company. I think people know that location.
Yes.
It's now a plot of land. But
exactly.
But all
Yes.
places that
Yeah.
needed a place and certainly needed the workers.
And actually, Young Radiator was the successor to the Atlas diesel plant that we talked about in the other room. When Atlas left, Young Radiator bought that plant. Okay,
We're learning on the spot here.
There we go. We are fortunate enough when Donnelly, they closed their plant here in Mattoon, and we were fortunate enough to get some of their artifacts, and one of them is this. This was in their main lobby, and it shows the covers of the first Family Circle magazine that was published in Mattoon, the 100 millionth, the 200 millionth, and the 300 millionth. And so we're very, very fortunate to have that.
Many people have worked at R.R. Donnelly's through
Yes.
the years. I know it's changed names, but when you say R.R. Donnelly's, they know where you're talking about.
So you mentioned during our setup conversation about the impact of COVID. So during COVID, of course, when we were on restricted hours and for a while closed, that gave me this. So I tell people this is the COVID room. I did all this research and put all this together during COVID because I was here by myself.
See Douglas Hart over here. I see some Mattoon World Series. Just some very cool, almost potpourri type things of Mattoon through the years.
It is, and kind of the focus, other than those few specifics, in the other displays in the other room, we focused on a specific industry or a factory. So what I did here was pretty much focused on categories. So like we talk about the different hotels, the photography shops, the drugstores, the butcher shops, the ice dealers. A lot of people don't realize that, Mattoon back in the day had 3 different ice plants. And that was back in the days when people had an ice box. And so we have an ice box that when we get school groups in here, their kids are all fascinated with an old-fashioned ice box. Let me cut in front.
Oh, you're fine.
So just for fun, I've got a bunch of fake food in there so they can...
I've heard of the term ice box. I'm old enough to know what that term means, but
Well, the Iceman would come around in a wagon, and he'd bring a block of ice, and you put it in the top of the ice box, and the ice kept the food cold until it melted. But the primary business of these ice plants, besides selling residential ice, is they iced all the trains that came through. Because in the early days, before mechanical refrigeration, anything that needed to be chilled, fruit, produce, meat, came through on boxcars that had ice bunkers of ice in the ends. So they would periodically stop and have to replenish the ice. And the Mattoon ice plants, the significant one was the Mattoon Refrigeration Company. They had a contract with the Big Four Railroad to ice every train between Kansas City and Indianapolis. So they stopped here to get fresh ice. And then we have, of course, the story on Lytle Park.
yes.
And in this section, I kind of call the municipal section because we highlight the city parks, the lakes, the cemeteries, the Mattoon Centennial. Mattoon was the first city in the state of Illinois that hosted free street fairs going back to 1897. And we have a story on the interurban line, which was also operated streetcars.
I've heard of that. I've heard of the legend of that through a Charleston program. That's pretty cool.
Right.
That's how the two communities
Connected
in the early days.
Exactly, and everybody is familiar, a lot of people are familiar that they had a very disastrous wreck, and that wreck was during the fair, and they doubled up the trains and the cars, and two of them collided. So everything in here, again, features pretty much that. We've got a display back here on what I call dining favorites. You know, we can't highlight every one of the 400 plus restaurants that have been in Mattoon over the years. So we kind of picked out some of the ones that people remember. And, you know, still to this day, people come in and say, I remember Gill's, I remember Tomaso's. When did Little Mexico start? One of the ones that's kind of my favorite to remember is Joe's Pizza, which was the very first pizza place in Mattoon. And he opened here in 1956. So again, you can see we just have a really varied exhibit on all the different businesses that really have contributed to Mattoon.
The movie theaters, I've heard about that history.
Yeah.
About many different movie theaters.
Oh yes.
In Mattoon and Charleston.
Yes, and there were a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, now we're just down to one.
Now we're down to exactly.
It's almost impossible to imagine life without internet today. It keeps us connected to work, school, and loved ones, no matter where they are. Fidium Fiber Internet now serves over 1 million locations, providing reliable, consistent service that keeps these connections strong. From vibrant cities to quiet rural areas, fiber broadband is a key driver of economic growth. Fidium is dedicated to supporting communities and enhancing lives through this essential technology. Learn more at fidiumfiber.com.